Throughout the franchise of The Walking Dead, we see a lot of communities and safe havens. We have seen iconic ones such as Alexandria and the Sanctuary, and this got me thinking, how secure are these locations, and which one would give you the best chance of in the apocalypse? This will be in chronological order, starting with the first season of the TV show. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing. The support on my channel and the Walking Dead content has been immensely popular with you guys. But without any further ado, here we go. The Atlanta Survivor Camp. The first camp we see in the Walking Dead TV show is the camp just outside of Atlanta. This was a rushed camp thrown together by a ragtag group of survivors, including Daryl Dixon, Shane, and Laurie. The main benefit of this camp is the pots and pans they have tied around their tents, where in the event of walkers turning up, they would hear them coming and be able to react accordingly. They also had a good vantage point from the top of a cliff, which gave them a considerable view of any walkers that may be coming from the city of Atlanta. The cliffs also had access to a large lake with fish swimming in it, so they had access to water easily, they had access to food, and they had a good safe point to view walkers from. But this camp was never meant to last, and walkers got in one night. The problem with the Atlanta camp is that the walkers were only not leaving the city because there was plenty of food there for them. However, when they attacked, there was no food left in Atlanta, and so they were forced to migrate to more rural areas. Overall, the first camp within the show wasn't too bad. Given the survivors did not understand the walkers and what makes them tick, in theory, this camp would have worked if the walkers did not migrate out of the city. But they had lost too many bodies from the assault, and it made more sense to take off to the next location as opposed to rescue the camp. The next location obviously being the Center for Disease Control. The CDC. The CDC is by far the most secure location within the apocalypse, until it explodes at the hands of Dr. Jenner. The main bulk of the building is underground, with ventilation, generators, and a big food supply. But the thing that makes this robust is that it has 4 walls, a roof, and a bulletproof glass that took a grenade to break out of. The CDC, when it was standing, was the most secure location within the apocalypse, but it did blow up. And for the sake of this video, I'm gonna count it as the blown up version. Otherwise, I feel like it's cheating a bit. So the CDC is certainly not secure anymore after the explosion. Hershels Farm. Hershels Farm was introduced in Season 2 of The Walking Dead after Carl gets shot by one of Hershels' farmhands. And so what remains at the Atlanta camp survivors set up camp at Hershels Farm while they look for Carol's missing daughter Sophia. Hershels Farm is relatively secure. They have barely any problems other than Glenn's discovery of the walkers who were in the barn. The entire time they were looking for Sophia, which must have been a week to 2 weeks, they only had one walker come anywhere near the farmland. And this was only the case because Carl accidentally lured it from the forest. Hershels Farm is huge, with little space for walkers to get the jump on the main house in the middle. And with sentries put up around the compound, they were secure for quite a while. The only reason the walkers eventually destroyed the farm was because the walkers migrating from Atlanta had formed a massive herd. This herd heard the gunshot from Carl's gun when he shot Shane to put down his reanimated corpse. But even then, the farm was effective. The walkers were spread out. They were largely attracted to the burning barn, and there was plenty of space for the group to move around without getting penned in. If anything, the number of walkers we see in the attack is the same, if not similar, to the ones that broke into Alexandria in Season 6. But because of the lack of buildings and walls, they're considerably more spread out and therefore manageable. I would say Hershels Farm was certainly more secure than the post-explosion CDC and the Atlanta camp, but definitely isn't the most secure we have seen within the show. The prison. This is the most secure camp within The Walking Dead that we have ever seen. It's a prison. It's designed to keep people in or keep people out. Rick and the gang had to take extreme measures just to get into the first little field area of the prison, before actually reaching the main compound's outside area, and then after that, you have solid brick walls and metal bars. I cannot stress how secure this location actually is. It's so secure that once all the walkers had been cleared out, the only thing that could actually break in were vehicles that had been rammed in, then a literal RPG, and a tank. Walkers were of no concern with the prison. Even if they breached the outer fence, they still had 2 more fences and a couple of brick walls they would have to break through. The prison was brilliant, but it came down to the destruction of the fences at the hand of the tank and the governor for the prison to actually fall. But even after the tank, I would argue that the prison was probably still reclaimable, but everyone had already evacuated and therefore it was no longer worth staying. Why did the governor destroy this exceptionally secure location? It was such a good location. Terminus. Terminus was actually surprisingly unsecure. You can simply walk in through the front entrance. It's surrounded by different railway lines, which lead to different areas within the state. If a large group came down the tracks looking for a community to raid, they would undoubtedly lose to the raiders. Terminus isn't secure. It's a warehouse with some fences that are like 2 meters high, but I think this is partially the point of Terminus. It's meant to allow people to just walk in, and then they can ambush them for their meat. The Terminus cannibals are clever enough to know how to make their facility secure from walkers, but evidently they want humans to walk in so they can lock them up and eat them. When the entire group finds Terminus, Rick knows instantly that something is wrong when he sees Hershel's pocket watch, which he had gifted to Glenn, and many other things that belong to the survivors from the prison, which means Terminus people had to react quickly, and they did so accordingly. They reacted to the realization from Rick and quickly attacked him and forced him into a container, shooting at his feet as if to make him fear for his life. Terminus works if you view it as more of a decoy base, which is designed to allow survivors to walk in so they can be attacked by the cannibals. However, a walker attack would always have devastated Terminus. Alexandria. Alexandria is no more of a robust base than any of the others that we have seen. We know that the walls were built by Deanna's husband Reggie at the beginning of the outbreak, and the use of corrugated sheet metal allows any pressure from the walkers to be dispersed through the wooden beams that hold these walls up. When the corrugated sheet metal had an old tower fall into it, the wall was compromised, and a massive herd of walkers broke in following, hearing gunfire as the walls attacked and drew them away from the rest of the herd from the quarry. The reason Alexandria was left standing from this attack was the RPG and oil mixture within the lake of the community, and the strength of the survivors within the camp to come together and work with Rip to wipe out a large chunk of the herd. The walls stood firm for a long time, until the Savior War, when Negan and the Saviors attacked the camp in retaliation to being locked inside the sanctuary. But this showed another great benefit to the Alexandrian community: the underground sewers. This underground sewer chain is very secure and was such a good hiding point for the survivors during the Savior attack. Once again, the community of Alexandria stood firm for a while, until the climactic end to the Whisperer War, when the people of Alexandria fled from the community and allowed the Whisperers to just roll through. This attack destroyed all the infrastructure within the community, such as generators, farms, and houses. I guess we'll see what will happen to Alexandria in the final season. However, it would not be surprised if this was the season when Alexandria finally bit the dust after 5 seasons in the show. Alexandria is one of the better communities within the series. The corrugated sheet metal and wooden beam support infrastructure can withstand any attacks that realistically it needs to. The sewer system is a good escape route for the survivors, and in terms of coziness, Alexandria is certainly one of the best for protecting guns, growing crops, keeping prisoners, and the fact that survivors live in houses. Hilltop. The Hilltop is relatively secure. The Hilltop is surrounded by a wooden wall. Wood probably isn't the best material to use, and it's armed by survivors with... Hang on, am I reading this right? Spears? Right, yes, spears. Anyway, the compound is a wooden wall which surrounds an old manor house. The major reason that the Hilltop struggles so much under the Savior rule is the prior leadership of Gregory, who was selling Hilltop out to the Saviors. He did this all the way up until Maggie had taken over and stolen the leadership from him. The Hilltop stood pretty strongly against everything, in all honesty. They were not directly attacked during the Savior War. Most of the interactions between the Hilltop and the Saviors happened outside of Hilltop, but it was the main location of the battles and the intimidation during the Whisperer War, due to being located so close to Alpha's territory. When the Whisperers attacked the Hilltop, there were just too many of them. They were breaking past the shielded defense of the Hilltop military. And on top of that, the flaming arrows and fire burning down the Hilltop was doomed to fall during the Whisperer War. It was the main location for Alpha's attacks, due to Lydia being imprisoned there. The major flaws of the Hilltop are that the walls are made of wooden logs, and that the sentries mainly use spears. The walls were more than easy to burn down, and as such they did. But also the Hilltop was quite small, and it did not actually have a lot of room for the residents. I know they grew the perimeter, but in the original, it was still quite small. However, Hilltop was surrounded by an open field and spikes along the perimeter, which meant that they had a considerable advantage against the walkers with them once again. Like Hershels Farm, they were very easy to spot. The Kingdom. The Kingdom shares a lot in common with Alexandria. It was a large school, which after the apocalypse was surrounded by a solid metal wall with incredibly high gates. The Kingdom had a considerably better layout than Alexandria. It was secure, they had firearms during the Savior War, and they also had an incredible amount of space to grow food, train soldiers, and do so much more. During the Savior War, Ezekiel kept the trade with the Saviors very under wraps and quiet, with only a few survivors within Ezekiel's primary circle that knew about this trade agreement. The kingdom was also allowed to keep their firearms, so as to not arouse suspicion amongst the survivors within the walls. During the Savior War, the kingdom was relatively untouched, with hardly any major fights occurring there, other than what Ezekiel had to go back in to save the people of the kingdom from the Saviors. It was the Whisperer War that posed catastrophic for the kingdom. During the times of the coalition, the kingdom held a fair to celebrate the coalition between Hilltop, Alexandria, Oceanside, and the kingdom, and to sign the declaration that when the Whisperers attacked, they would all come together to eradicate them. Unbeknownst to the coalition, this event had been infiltrated by the leader of the Whisperers, Alpha, without her zombie skin. This was an attempt to scare the communities and make them realize they are not safe anywhere within this world now. Alpha takes 12 hostages at this fair and slaughters all but one, putting their heads onto spikes to mark her border. This all happened due to the failure of the security of the kingdom and how easy it actually was for Alpha to just meander her way into the fair. The Sanctuary. The Sanctuary was the home to the Saviors and was a very secure unit which the members of the militia actually did not know the location of originally. The Sanctuary was a large factory building which was surrounded by walkers who were chained to the fence and dunked in molten metal. The walkers were unable to get into the Sanctuary due to silenced weapons and a seemingly endless supply of bullets. The fortress of the Sanctuary was so heavily guarded and they knew that they could hold off most threats, so when a lorry crashed into the central gate and a flood of walkers stormed in, the Sanctuary was assumed to be finished. The sole problem of the Sanctuary is that if walkers get in, there is no way out for the Saviors, and they become trapped inside, which we saw happen when the militia attacked and the lorry was rammed in. Part of the reason the Sanctuary stood for so long was due to the leadership of Negan. Negan was a big part of the Sanctuary, and his name and brutal leadership is probably what kept the Sanctuary standing for as long as it did. The Sanctuary's main strength was the scale of it, and the walker fence. However, despite being heavily guarded, the militia still broke through and were able to destroy the Sanctuary and flood walkers into the factory. Yes, Negan and everyone took it back, but they certainly made a good effort. Oceanside. Oceanside is a catastrophic story. A group discovered by Tara of solely female survivors after Simon of the Saviors eradicated all the men and boys of the community. The leaders of the Oceanside community then took their people into hiding on the side of the ocean. Wait, is that what they call it, Oceanside? That's real original, Kirkman. Anyway, Oceanside is very good at protecting their hiding place. Anyone who discovers the location of Oceanside is killed by the leaders of Oceanside. During the building of the bridge between the communities, it is discovered that Oceanside were murdering the Saviors. The main thing that protected Oceanside the whole way throughout their time on the show was the ruthlessness of the leaders, and how they would not let anyone who knew the location of Oceanside live until they knew they were absolutely secure and safe with those communities. The only physical defense that the community had was the forest, a gate, and the ocean backing onto the community. The ocean removed one key risk: walkers don't swim, and it was a considerable distance from Alpha's territory during the Whisperer War. Oceanside was not a good camp in terms of physical defense, but in terms of the brutality of its leaders, it was exceptional at this. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please let me know down below. Also, while you're down there, let me know what community you think is the most secure. Based on the data and the research that I've actually done for this episode, I would say the prison was the most secure by a long shot. Also, down in the comments, let me know what you want to see me make. I'm more than happy to make loads more Walking Dead content. I think I see it as the primary route I'm going to take with this channel. So what do you guys want to see from me? But yeah, anyway guys, thanks very much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye.